Welcome to today's ProdPad webinar, how to establish a product idea intake process. So I'm Megan, I'm the CMO here at ProdPad, and Julie.
And I'm Julie Hammers. I'm currently head of design at ProdPad, and I'm head of product and head of product. Sorry, it has been a long week, folks. Happy to see everybody. I'm excited to do this talk about our idea intake process.
Brilliant, wonderful. Okay, great. So just before we kick it all off, I just want to explain. Anyone who's new to ProdPad hasn't heard of ProdPad. We are a all-in-one product management software, home for all of your product management work. So we help product managers manage their idea backlog, a central repository for all their customer feedback and tools with which to analyze your feedback, and then importantly, your road mapping tools. So ways to build your roadmap, communicate your roadmap, and to capture your strategy, your OKRs, and then importantly, the link between all of those things. So yeah, if you haven't tried ProdPad before, I'd urge you to go. We've got a free trial, no card, no commitment, or you can book in a demo and we can talk you through it at prodpad.com. And also importantly, ProdPad comes with the greatest product management AI out there. And again, that is available in the trial, so in the free trial. So go in and have a look and have a play. You could get Copilot to write up some documentation you need doing tomorrow or something. But also, there's actually a bunch of ways that ProdPad Copilot can help with the idea intake process. So we can show you a few of those later on. Okay, so let me outline the full agenda for today. How to build a product idea intake process. So we'll start off talking about why you should bother with this. So why taking in product ideas is a good idea. We will cover the distinction between ideas and feedback, because that's important and that has an impact. What a good idea intake process looks like. So Julie will map out what an ideal process looks like so you can see what our suggestion is. The steps to setting up that process then, so we'll talk to you about how to implement that. And then importantly, ways to communicate that process to ensure adoption, to get buy-in from the organisation so the process actually works. We'll cover how to set expectations with all your contributors and how important that is. And then finally, how to get your idea submitters, your stakeholders to self-serve updates so that they aren't creating a whole bunch of noise for you. Okay, so let's start with why. Why is it worth your time and effort to set up an idea intake process? What benefits will this bring? Like, why on earth do you want to invite ideas from far and wide? So let me tell you, it's a good idea to welcome ideas from other people because it is fundamental to a growth mindset. So it's the best way to make sure you're always open to learning and finding new opportunities to create value. And part of that is being receptive to other people's ideas. It's about not being arrogant and thinking that you always know best and you're the only one who has the worthwhile ideas. As Jana says, actually, our CEO and co-founder, as product people, it's not your job to have all the answers. It's your job to ask the best questions. So if other people think they have answers and stuff, great, send them in, then you ask the right questions to develop those and nurture those ideas. And don't forget, taking in ideas doesn't mean that you have to execute them all, of course. It is also key to making sure that you get other perspectives, right, that you might be missing. So maybe you have customer teams or support teams that go like super deep with users and customers. They have really unique insight, understanding of their sort of problems and their objectives. You might have people in other areas of the business completely who have ideas around how to technically how to deliver a feature or a service in a more cost-effective way, and therefore increasing the business value of your product. Because remember, of course, that the problems that your product should be solving can also be for the company, for the organization, not just the customer. So yeah, different perspectives, very important. Having an idea intake process will also encourage engagement from the whole organization. So you're giving them a voice, you're offering them the chance to shape the product evolution, and that's compelling, right? So that'll get their attention. Whether people's ideas are strategically right or not is often, it's almost beside the point. Encouraging people to think about the product, making them feel like their contribution is valuable will go a long way to helping you establish that sort of company-wide product culture. It'll encourage colleagues to take the time to understand product management process, understand what product is, what it does, and that creates an opportunity for you to explain how you go about your product decisions, what the fact that you've got product objectives, a vision, a well thought out roadmap, whatever you need people to know about your approach. An idea intake process creates the engagement for you to be able to do that and gets the attention. It's a path to a true innovation culture, which will mean better results for your company, for you. You're harnessing the collective knowledge of the company to crack problems in a novel way. You'll be saying goodbye to silos, right? So you'll be creating transparency from inviting ideas and sharing your process, more understanding of what product is across teams, more collaboration. They won't think that product is the place where ideas go to die. God knows what happens with them when they're over there. And you'll build relationships, right, with people in other departments, other teams. Everyone will play nicely together. So that's the why. But let's take a moment to clarify what we mean by ideas, particularly in relation to feedback. So you'll have noticed that I was talking a lot there about taking in ideas from your internal sort of teammates and colleagues, right? But what about customers? So some product teams will actively invite ideas from their customer base. They'll explicitly ask users to submit any product ideas they may have. They'll have an idea Dropbox or portal or whatever. Now, our advice is that this is better framed as feedback. So ask your customers if they have any feedback. What problems are they facing? How well do they feel that your product is solving their problems? So when you use ProdPad, for example, as your product management tool, you get an unlimited number of feedback portals and widgets where you ask questions that elicit sort of useful feedback, not feature requests. And importantly, the responses come into you through those portals into your ProdPad as feedback. So the thoughts and contributions from your customers come to you as the product manager as feedback. And then it's up to you, obviously, to understand the underlying problem the customer is facing and then start to think about possible solutions, or indeed point to where you're already working on solutions on your roadmap. And why do we suggest that customer input is always framed as feedback? Otherwise, you run the risk of becoming the dreaded feature factory, or what Jana calls the sort of agency trap, building features to order, blindly building what's being requested without exploring other possible solutions. So yeah, if you explicitly ask your customers for their ideas, you're also setting the expectation that their ideas will get built just as they've described them, and only disappointment lies in that direction. So rather encourage feedback, and then you can enjoy more flexibility, explore different solutions. It's also worth, though, being clear with your internal contributors too about the distinction. And really that's for two reasons. One, so your customer facing teams understand the difference and they can then actively reframe the feature requests that customers bring to them. So when a customer tells them they want or need feature X, they can ask the right questions to find out like why they feel that they need that, what problem do they think it would solve, and thereby bring it back to the problem, which then comes into product team as a piece of feedback. And there on the slide, I've got some examples of how the customer facing teams can work with customers and reframe what was an idea into some feedback. And then also secondly, in terms of making that distinction to your internal teams, it means that your internal teams understand that they can submit feedback, right? If they encounter a problem with the product or something's not quite working or whatever, they don't have to come up with a solution. They can just send you some feedback. But on that first point quickly, how do you get your customer teams to not just take feature requests from customer at face value? How do you get them to delve deeper and work in this way to get useful feedback? We've covered this in a previous webinar. We have another bunch of examples here to help with this. So you can scan these and help yourself. I can also include them in the follow-up email that we'll send you. But then we also have this, which is a ready-made presentation deck that you can download a copy of, and you can use this directly with your customer teams. So you can literally present this to your customer teams. It covers why you need the best quality feedback possible, what's in it for them, so delving deeper, how that will make their jobs easier and more enjoyable. It's got examples of exactly what good product feedback looks like. And then it's got the list of the questions to ask to delve in with those customers and get to the heart of the problem. It also covers how to help or train your customer facing teammates to talk to the roadmap in the best way. We'll come to the steps that you need to set up an idea intake process later, but certainly one of them is to communicate this distinction between ideas and feedback. So what exactly is the difference? This is how we define it here at ProdPad. So you can take a look. There, essentially, feedback is about identifying an issue or a problem or a friction point, and then ideas are about possible solutions to that. I appreciate there are a lot of words on this one slide, but we have got a version for you to take away. Another download, but we created these downloadable guidelines designed to help you with that internal communication of this ideas feedback distinction. So you can grab yourself a copy of these and you can share these internally, or indeed adapt them if your definition is ever so slightly different. Again, I'll include that in the follow-up email. So now you see why an idea intake is important, what exactly we mean by ideas. Now, with this need for ideas comes the need to put process and boundary around how you gather these contributions from across the company. Otherwise, you'll be drowning in messages and thoughts from myriad places, and you'll be drowning in an influx and you won't be able to make head and tail of it. So you need to establish a process and procedure around this idea intake to protect yourself from chaos and establish order. So really that you can turn these contributions from colleagues into an advantage rather than an inconvenience. So what does that order and process look like? Here's our suggested process, and this is what all of our customers do, and certainly what we do here at ProdPad. So over to Julie.
Thanks, Megan. Today, the crux of what we're going to talk about is how to establish a robust idea intake process. This particular example shows how it might work with ProdPad, but generally, the idea is that, as a couple of you said in the comments, ideas come from all kinds of places. And so you want to have integrations and or touch points or a way to not require your stakeholders, peers, folks that are contributors to have to leave if they have an app that they're always in, whether that's like HubSpot or Salesforce or wherever, they don't have to leave necessarily, or Slack if you work out of Slack. They don't have to leave where they're at, and they're able to add those ideas in place without having to bop around or have to go through a convoluted process just to submit an idea. So you want to have a way to capture all those channels and have it all go to a centralized backlog and have all the ideas all have the same criteria as they come in. And then the next central part of this process is that you need to have a triage and review process. And I'll go more into detail in that in a bit. And that's where you'll prioritize everything that comes in and evolve the discussion. You'll want to poke holes on things and get clarity and verify the ideas as they come in. And then those ideas will go through your workflow. And we'll talk more about what the idea workflow will be once you've triaged it into your backlog. And what's nice about ProdPad is that we are integrated in a way with our feedback platform and with our roadmap that we are able to, at the same time that those ideas come in, you want to associate any feedback, customer feedback that goes along with that idea, because that helps make the case or helps to clarify the problem space, like all the different kind of edges that you could look at when you're trying to like look at a problem. And then you can also very clearly be able to link that idea then to something that's on your roadmap. And that is part of the process as well. So critically, throughout all of this, there should be automatic updates or automations in place so that everyone is up to date. So the person who added the idea and then everybody who has touched that idea in the process is then notified of any changes that kind of happens across your kind of product development cycle. Going? Okay. Once you have set up this initial flow where you're capturing everything, let's break down this process a little bit more. So it starts simple, like you have your contributors that like add the ideas, or they have ideas, they submit them, they go into your unsorted backlog. And then, as I said, your PMs, solo, either whether you're a solo PM or if you're part of a team, you're going to triage that list. And then it's going to go to a backlog, and then it's going to progress through a workflow. And then again, like you're going to have those automatic updates as it goes through. When it's in that unsorted list, you're going to be evaluating and these ideas for kind of merit, clarity, and strategic fit. And then once it's triaged, those ideas will go through your backlog and progress through your workflow stages. Throughout the entire process, again, there'll be links to folks that were involved from the beginning. So by doing that, why bother with making sure that folks that submitted an idea are updated? Like, it closes the loop and it builds trust, because I think a lot of folks would echo that for teams can, like your kind of your sales team or your customer success team can get disheartened if they've submitted ideas before and they just don't hear anything back about it. It just goes into a black hole. So by having this centralized process with notifications and keeping everybody in the loop, that kind of helps to build process, and they can see that things can actually happen from something that gets submitted. Okay. So once you have, I hate to say that I love to triage, but honestly, I'm like an inbox zero junkie, so I actually really like it. So here are my kind of pre-flight steps for any idea that we're going to evaluate that comes into your idea backlog. And keep in mind that you have in ProdPad, you have Copilot at your side to help automatically triage stuff that comes in as well. So first of all, you want to look at your impact and effort. Other different teams have different strategies just in terms of like how you quantify impact and effort scoring. You're able to customize that in ProdPad too, but yeah, you want to understand not only how like not only like the impact like that it could have right now, but you also want to understand like the impact it could have in the future too. So it's a little like a nuance sometimes, but sometimes something can actually have, if it is delivered at a certain point after something else has been delivered, it's going to have a bigger impact. It's worth noting that impact is not a one-time score. Sometimes impact can evolve over time too. So you also want to understand like the alignment with your product vision. And overall, is this something that we do? Is this part of our values? Does this align with kind of things that we would do as a company? If you use personas, does it align with kind of your ICP or your kind of target folks that you design for and build products for? Tagging is a big thing. Like some people use tags, some people don't, but adding tags to add to that metadata so that you can start to like group and chunk different ideas up into an initiative or into a theme is usually pretty helpful. If it's something that you know from the get-go that is going to be owned by a certain team, you can assign an owner and add like any links for associated feedback. If you already know in our app, we're able to see related feedback or related ideas that might be similar or in the same theme with our AI and machine learning. But beyond that, other things you can do is OKRs. So some folks will have like overall like KPIs that they're looking for as a business. Other folks use OKR. It might be not just like you're looking to see whether it aligns for the roadmap. You might be saying like, okay, like which of our 4 objectives that we have right now as a company, does it align with any of those? If not, then maybe it goes into a holding pattern. And then a little kind of last but not least here, like you want to make sure you ask for feedback from the folks that, submitted the idea. Outcomes are very important. It's what kind of easy. Ideas are cheap, right? But it's a little bit harder to say, what do you think what the outcome would be, or what would happen if this was launched in our app tomorrow? What would this do for the business? What would this do for our customers? For you want to actually have an idea of that before you actually start any discovery or kind of development for sure on it. Too often I've seen teams take something all the way through like design discovery and all the way up until it's in development and say, okay, how are we going to measure this? So, or what are we hoping to do? And yeah, that can often be too late. It's better to start thinking about that at the very beginning when those ideas come in. And yeah, and lastly, like I said before, yeah, you just want to make sure that it aligns with things that you have currently on your roadmap. Okie dokie. You have triaged your lovely ideas that have come through. You now have things sitting in a backlog. So now what happens? It is best to have an idea management workflow. In PodPad, we have workflow stages. You might be familiar with these from like development tools too, where something's like in progress, done, your typical kind of Kanban states. But these states should relate directly to your product development process for your company. So the labels, what they're called, they should be clear enough that everybody in the company can go, okay, I know what state this is in. Try not to use like team only names for these things, or else it can be confusing about what state something is in. So try to keep it to a minimal amount of states, like 4 to 5, and it'll make your life easier as you're trying to move things through a flow. So I'm going to talk briefly about what these example states mean and what they do for us. So for us at ProdPad, we have the initial state of a PM has reviewed the ideas. And then we have a definition stage, which is where the initial kind of specification starts to happen, where you start to define what the scope is, what's out of scope, the opportunity space, and like what the solution to this problem should include. And usually, if you're working with a kind of design partner, it starts to get a little bit more filled out. Once you have that initial idea, you might start talking to your customers. You might have a prototype, you might have something very light that maybe you've done something in AI and you just want to get it in front of customers really quickly. You're in discovery, you are trying to understand, are you solving the right problems? Is this validating whether this actual problem is worth solving? So edit is worth noting at any point. The idea can actually like fall out of the process and say if something's not, we're not, it doesn't seem to be landing with folks, it just doesn't seem to be like scratching the right itch. You have the right to pull something out of the flow and put it in your archive or put it in your parking lot. Don't be beholden to the workflow. It doesn't own you. And then, yeah, so if it does go through discovery and into design, then you're going to get it to that 80% point with your design partners to start to really flesh things out. And you've at this point should have a full specification, in this part of this design process too, you should be pulling in your technical peers to do technical discovery and building out that part of the specification as well. And then it is ready to get prioritized. And so this is the point where you can use an integration in with ProdPad or your tool to send it off into development and then still have that status and have that content be synced back to your tool. But this allows you to keep the product kind of discovery and vetting process separate from your dev tool, because the issue with having your ideas and like feedback going straight into your dev tool is you run the risk of like just becoming a feature factory of the ideas, just becoming like a backlog that is endless and that isn't properly vetted in terms of what ends up getting implemented at the end of the day. It gives us as PMs a lot more control over it. And then lastly, we've got a parking lot, because sometimes ideas are good ideas, but they're not good ideas right this moment. So you need a place where you can just pause and put it to the side. But that's an overview. And as I said, like these stages and steps should align with your product development process. You can tailor it to the way that makes sense for your company.
Great. Thanks, Julie. And then, okay, so you've seen our suggested idea intake process mapped out there. So let's give you some tips on implementing that, on getting it set up. So broadly speaking, there are sort of 4 steps to the setup before you start the sort of communication process and getting buy-in and stuff. So as Julie demonstrated there, first up, you need a space for all these ideas to flow into. You do not want to be gathering up ideas from multiple sources manually. Things fall through the cracks. You don't have the time for that. We're obviously biased and think that space should be ProdPad, but whatever you choose, it's worth having that separate space from your development sprint planning. As Julie just said, then the product teams have come to us sort of time and time again saying that they are tangled up in a giant mess in Jira. They can't see the wood for the trees. There are literally half-formed ideas from some bloke in sales sitting in the same place as fully spec'd, validated, ready for development work. And that's a lot of mess. Spare thought for your developers, that is overwhelming. It's best just to show them what's actually being prioritized and thought through, as Julie said. The other advantage, obviously, of using ProdPad, as Julie showed, is that connection to your feedback and your roadmap. It's all together in one place. Copilot AI will do a lot of automated similarity matching, linking feedback, flagging duplicate ideas, etc. Next, you need to, once you've got your central place, you need to set up those integrations so that you can offer everyone that sort of super simple idea submission without leaving the tools they are already in. So for ProdPad, those integration possibilities look like this. So you need to decide what you need. So make sure you understand all the tools that everyone else is using and hook them up. This is about making it super non-onerous for people. There's also a bunch of other ways that ProdPad can remove effort in the process, both for you as the PM and for the idea submitter. Like I said, there's automatic linking of ideas to related feedback, so you don't have to manually go hunting through your feedback. Your idea submitter actually as well gets an instant picture of how well this aligns with customer problems that you already know about. Duplicate ideas are flagged at point of submission. So this is actually also great for stopping people submitting a new idea when something, when the idea already exists or something very similar is in the backlog. And that, again, is a great sort of time saver for you. Look, they'll get flagged, oh, it's already here, it's already, and then they can see the progress on that idea. Also, love this, and we will talk about this a little bit later on as well, but they can, or you, whoever is looking at the idea, can get instant analysis of strategic alignment. So this is great help. So Copilot, with a click of a button, can give the idea submitter an assessment of how well their idea aligns with the product vision, with the strategy, with the OKRs. It gives also constructive feedback and suggestions on how to implement or how to improve alignment. So the idea submitter can either tweak it or even maybe ditch it. Think, oh, I'm way off here, I won't bother. The Copilot can help them also flesh out the ideas. I think I saw in the comments earlier someone talked about what if people don't have enough data at the point of having the idea, and I'll come back to this in a sec. But then finally, as Julie has demonstrated there, everyone will get automatic notification, so you don't have to manually update all these idea submitters. So yes, this is what I'm talking about with a Copilot helping to flesh out these ideas. Your idea submitters can just have, nothing more than a title. They can click a button and Copilot will generate a sort of fully fleshed out idea description. It will include reasonable target outcomes. It will think about risks to consider. And this is all because of the deep understanding of product management best practice that Copilot has alongside the context data that it has access to. So everything about your product and your existing backlog that's in your ProdPad. So then the idea submitter can accept that or can work with ProdPad to refine it. Julie.
Yes. So step 3, how often are you refining and triaging this backlog? It can be the bane of some teams' existence sometimes when it's easy for kind of any type of backlog to grow and it's there for 12 months and then all of a sudden you have to just archive the whole thing because there's no way that you're actually going to act on any of these things. Making it a habit is crucial. You need to decide what the cadence you'll be, like if you want to do this like daily, weekly, bi-weekly, just be consistent. Give yourself a cal meeting slot where, your team is going through these things together. If you're working as a team, it can be helpful to maybe have some PMs like pre-triage items, and then before there's kind of like a vetting process to decide like whether something will move from like that like reviewed state or definition state then into kind of more full into discovery. That's the point where you're saying like, okay, this is a bet that we're going to take on. And so you might want to have a special team meeting that you do as a group to review those ideas. But yeah, like I said, it keeps like doing it, especially if you actually are able to be in the like, good position of having your teams like submitting ideas on a regular basis. It's something that you'll need to stay on top of. So I recommend starting with a weekly session and just adjusting based on your idea volume. It really is tough, I think, to as a single PM to process more than like 20 ideas, I think, in a week. Realistically, if you want to do them any justice. Even with AI's help, like it can, if you want to make sure that you're being careful with your triage, just make sure that you're giving yourself enough time. And then lastly, setting your kind of workflow stages. Like I said before, this should make sense for your team and your process. They should include maybe things like discovery or design, ready for dev or parking lot. And yeah, it should reflect like how your team actually works, like not some kind of idealized double diamond process on the full workflow. Keep it simple and evolve it. See where the pain points are before you add more stages.
I'm on mute. Classic. Absolute
Yeah,
classic. Still
bingo
got the
card.
capacity for that. Amazing. The key to making all this work, to having a successful idea intake process, is communicating the process to everyone, like making it super clear and motivating. If you don't do a good enough job of this, then it'll all fall down. You'll have a process with no ideas working through it or ideas coming at you from outside of this process. So you need to communicate the process to get buy-in, ensure adoption, ensure everyone's doing what you need them to do. So let's start with how to communicate. So I recommend like creating a presentation, not dissimilar to sort of what we're doing now. Visualize the process and explain it to everyone. And then I would get a slot in a town hall, in an all hands meeting, make sure it is getting the visibility that it needs to get. But of course, some people will be asleep in the town halls at the back or whatever. So that's not enough. I would take that show on the road. I'd do a bit of a road show. I would speak to all the sort of department heads, try and secure a slot in each team's regular meetings and present it there. And while you were talking to those department heads, it's probably worth having a one-on-one conversation with them, getting their buy-in, tell them why it's important, how it will benefit their area of the business, and recruit them to help drive these behaviours in their team. Write it up, obviously keep it short and snappy, engaging, and then put it wherever your internal communication tends to happen, like Slack or Teams or whatever. Pin it, flag it, mention those department heads that you've chatted up. And then importantly, make it part of new hire onboarding so that it's continuously part of the process. And also you're introducing that at the point of onboarding with someone, and so that means that they are coming in with the perception that there is a product culture here. And don't forget to keep refreshing this in their mind, so either through like on the spot coaching or feedback, like maybe you hear in a meeting someone has what is an idea for the product and you say, hey, don't forget, submit that, send that in, or have a regular pattern of going back into team meetings or whatever. So that is how we recommend you tell them the how. Now, what should you tell them, Julie?
Yeah. So we want to start with the why, always. So you want to communicate clearly. You need their ideas basically because they're closest to the customers and they have valuable insights, right? But yeah, you need to start with the why of like why it's so critical that like we get these like diverse, because basically like diverse teams and diverse like products are stronger, right? And the more that we incorporate all these different points of view, the stronger it's going to be for everybody. It's very just to make sure that they feel welcomed and included in the process. And it shows that like your team is open and working with other departments and you're not closed off is going to help everybody out. And again, like Megan covered earlier, you want to cover that difference between what is feedback and what is an idea and whether, what the right time thing is, but also I think it's important to say, hey, there's no bad ideas and there's no bad submissions. If someone goofs and there's some feedback as an idea, that's okay. Like you can just let them know, hey, this is better off as feedback next time. Just make it a learning process because it can be hard for people to grok maybe the first time around. You also want to communicate kind of, then this is where you're like overarching like product kind of strategy and like what you should be talking to your whole company about anyway, but just reiterating that and saying, look, this is our vision for the company over the next 5 to 10 years. And this is what our value prop is. These are our OKRs currently. Here's where you can find them. This is where our roadmap is. And here are the kind of like our ICP, our user profiles or personas, and have all the information readily available so that if people are saying like, hey, I have an idea, they can even just check and see proactively like whether that fits their lines. And again, it's going to be a learning process for everybody. And as we talked about earlier, you want to make sure you've mapped out the process and just have it in a doc that's readily available or share them like we can share from PodPad or whatever tool you have to kind of show them like how that workflow works and so that they'll understand that things aren't gonna like everything does get seen. Like I do see every single because we use Slack at PodPad and like I see every single piece of feedback that comes in through customer success or sales and I see it on the daily. So if they understand that, they'll say, hey, this is a channel that I can use. And then, yeah, definitely explain your prioritization criteria, how that works, how it's customized in your particular company, and give examples of what those like good ideas might be. And say, okay, this is something that was submitted, and this was really novel and had fit really well. Just find that example like in your particular roadmap or create one if there isn't one and use that as a sample for folks to use too.
Just some few little extra tips on getting people engaged with this. You could use the reports in ProdPad to see your idea submission leaderboard. So you could try and stoke up a bit of competition amongst everyone. I've actually redacted the names on this screenshot, so I'm not publicly naming and shaming my colleagues here at ProdPad. Ones that are down at the bottom of that chart anyway. But hey, I might be tempted to do it internally. Make sure everyone has the Slack and Teams app of your chosen tool installed. So it might be worth throwing some instructions on how to go to the Slack app store or the Teams app store, whatever. And then, yeah, look, these last 2 points we've already said, but there's worth stressing again. Tell them why they should care and just make sure you make it super easy to actually submit ideas. So, those extra fields on the submission form, do you actually need that? They might make your life a bit easier, but are they going to be a barrier to actually getting the ideas in? So focus on what makes it easy for them and then tell them importantly how easy it is. Okay, you followed all our advice here. You've really hyped this up with everyone. They're totally bought in. They're pumped about ideation and collaboration. But you have to be careful that you're not suggesting that all the ideas will be given like the same amount of love and attention. You don't want everyone to assume that every idea they send your way will get deep discovery and stands a good chance of hitting the roadmap and being released to production. If you don't set expectations, you'll be creating a world of pain for yourself. So you'll get badgered for updates. So if you don't set expectations, people will decide for themselves how quickly things should be reviewed, and they'll come to you for updates rather than understanding realistic timeframes and the fact that they'll automatically be notified, so there's no need to chase. You'll have disappointed and disheartened teammates. So if they hear nothing and they believe you've had their idea for long enough, they could lose faith in the process. So they'll start to think you don't value their input, that it's pointless to send ideas in because they don't get looked at, they won't bother again. And then obviously you run the risk of potentially missing out on some good ideas there. And this actual one is pretty scary. You might get miscommunication with customers. So with your customer facing teams, if they don't have the right expectations about your process and how ideas are assessed and prioritized, they might believe that submitting an idea guarantees it's going to be built, and they can start making promises to customers like, oh yeah, I've actually told the product team about that, so that'll be coming soon. So you need realistic expectations as part of this. So how do you set those expectations, Julie?
Yes. So here's the fun part. You got to say yes to now. You need to, again, like I said, sounding a little bit like a broken record, but just talking about what good looks like and what ideas or features are able to make it through the process. Talk about the product vision, OKRs, what aligns, our prioritization criteria, and what the typical flow looks like in your organization. It might be the case, depending on what your development flow can be, like how realistically will an idea go from like conception to production. We love our like quick wins quadrant in ProdPad, the things that are potentially high impact and less effort, but not everything is a quick win, right? And some things will need to get broken down or like broken out into kind of different experiments or phases. And yeah, it's really important that you communicate that, hey, this type of project or this type of an idea will realistically take us a quarter, or realistically, this is a quick win, but we've got a lot of like high priority stuff on right now. And so once we pick up that work, it'll be done in a week, but it's going to come after these things that we already have laid out. So really super helpful. Just be a good partner to folks that are submitting ideas and help set those realistic expectations. So it's just, yeah, all about relative priority, your team velocity, and making sure that we've explored the problem space properly. So when people understand your criteria and your timelines up front, they'll submit better ideas. They'll want to make sure it's the best possible idea, like it's crossing all the like the T's and I's, or dotted all the I's, just to make sure that it's going to have a good chance to make it into your roadmap.
Great. So I'm slightly conscious of the time. We obviously want to leave some time for questions. So I'll just rattle through this quickly. This was just a sort of special shout out to when you've got scenarios with those heavy hitter stakeholders. I've said CEO here, but that's just because I like the rhyme. Is there any sort of exec level power player in your organization, and they will need some particular skills? We've got some tips there, but also so we've covered that topic: how to say no to the CEO, how to manage your stakeholders, avoid hippo situation. And again, there are a few resources there, including a webinar with Melissa Apple. Yeah, do take a look at that. Just to remind you, again, this is useful when it comes to setting expectations, the vision alignment assessment that I mentioned earlier. So ProdPad Copilot can, at a click of a button, can generate really considered answers that you can use with those sort of tricky stakeholders as feedback on why their idea might not be the best strategic fit right now. So if ever you're in that situation, like use Copilot, let Copilot have the awkward conversation for. Okay, so this is important. I'm going to have to rattle through this, but this helps keeps the noise down for you as a PM. So how do you get people to self-serve their updates rather than coming to us? So we've covered a lot of this, right? Those integrations, make sure they're set up because that will do it. Make sure they have the right toggles set in their notifications so that they're getting the emails. They can ask Copilot for updates directly from Slack, for example. So I'll show you that in a sec. There's some other things on there. This is it. So this is how you can speak directly to Copilot from Slack, ProdPad Copilot. So they can ask for an update on an idea, either the idea name or the number, whatever they've got. And as you can see there, Copilot will give them the lowdown, including the workflow stage. So in this example, this idea they're asking about is currently in the design workflow stage. So that's a great way of your stakeholders self-serving their updates. And just a final reminder, a little plug for PodPad, we haven't done that enough. All contributors are free of charge. So there's no cost for a reviewer, as we call them, seat. And then reviewers can submit ideas or indeed feedback. They can own ideas that they've submitted, which gives them full editing rights, but they can't push them into development. You'll probably be relieved to hear. So finally, we have talked about the idea intake process and how to establish that. We have a webinar and a complete ebook to download, which talks about the entire product management process. So if there are other areas of your process you're looking to optimize and improve, do check those out. We have a matter of minutes for questions. What have we got? I know that there's some questions have come in through the chat as well, so we could also try and dig in and find those.
So we have a couple of Davids here. So I think I would like to start with David Gansey's question about how do you suggest making this kind of process as efficient as possible? I like having a robust process, but I don't like spending too much time maintaining one. Totally, I get you. One of my mantras is less talk, more rock. And we should have just enough process that works for your company. I think what's helpful is to approach your process like you would building a feature. Approach like you creating processes for your company, treat it like you would be creating like an experiment or an MVP. Be willing to try something. Sometimes things don't work, but get lightweight enough that you could try something maybe with one team or with one project first, see how that goes. And then if that works, then you can start to scale that out to the rest of the org. And yeah, in terms of changing things, just like investing in the stock market these days, don't touch it. Like just try to let it be and change. Like when you have an app that makes it easy for you, that definitely helps. But trying to like only make changes to your process a couple times a year is good because it keeps your team from feeling like they're getting shifted all over the place with like new changes or whatever. So keep it small, experiment, and then try to keep it consistent.
Nice, great. We've got David Harrison's got a question here. What role does user research and following up with feedback submitters or gathering metrics, things that take longer, fit into the discovery cadence?
It's a good question. So in terms of it, really, you can have that information filter in at different stages. I would suggest that something like at the like definition stage, it actually helps to have that information ahead of time, and that if you have maybe some kind of like panel research or opportunity areas, say like you're going into a new market and you have tasked your user research team to go investigate this market and create like some kind of maybe some competitive analysis for you or some kind of persona development, you can use all that information and like tie to it or link to it from at that idea stage because usually like that kind of information informs a lot of different ideas. You might have something like an opportunity solution tree where you have one kind of bigger opportunity that a lot of ideas are going to come through. And I find that a good UX like research team is actually informing higher up in the process, like at the top level. So you might actually like on your initiatives or on your themes, on your roadmap, that's where like that good research will come into. But you might also see if you're trying to talking about like the measuring of things. I think we covered this, I think, in maybe another webinar, but just in terms of measuring outcomes, we have distinct parts of our idea workflow after it's been completed to actually come back and say, okay, whether something was done and was it a success or not a success. So you can actually create additional columns for your idea workflow to actually note that measurement or that how things did. I know I'm talking at a high level here, but it is possible to get those things, but like I think it really depends on how long your stages typically are. But in order to not hold back things, I would say try to keep like the kind of like the broader user research more associated with like initiatives versus like at the idea level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And yeah, this product process content, we put optimization sort of tips and workflow stages in a lot of that as well. So that's definitely worth checking out. I have run over slightly, I have run out of time, but thank you so much, Julie, for all the insight. That was great. And thanks everyone for joining. Like I say, I will send a follow-up email in a day or two, include the recording and links to the resources that we have covered. So yeah, thank you very much. Apologies if we didn't get to your questions, but yeah, thanks very much, and thanks, Julie.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye now.
Bye.